Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. You know, we all want people who come here legally. And yes, we are descendants of legal immigrants. But my colleagues on the other side of the aisle is making an argument that's often blamed on Republicans, saying that we want to bring people here so we have cheap labor. That argument just made is that that's what we need to do, is bring people here for cheap labor. The Biden administration, I appreciate the comments that have been made by my colleagues before me. As they've said, the Biden administration's consistently shown a lack of leadership and unwillingness to secure our southern border. It's a dereliction of duty. In spite of this, many in the public sphere claim Congress must pass new laws or adopt a border deal in order to secure the border. But it's difficult to comprehend this position when we can look at the Trump administration's handling at the border and the success achieved regarding border security while using the same authorities available to the Biden administration today.
Chairwoman Foxx. The gentlelady is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from Tennessee for yielding and his great work on this impeachment resolution. Mr. Speaker, Secretary Mayorkas' political career is on the chopping block where it rightfully belongs. He has failed to apply the laws that would stop this invasion at the southern border. To those who claim that this impeachment is for purely political purposes, you're dead wrong. This is about upholding the rule of law that governs our republic, the same rule of law that Secretary Mayorkas has ignored and forsaken every day. Secretary Mayorkas has had innumerable opportunities to enforce the laws that are already on the books, but has chosen not to. He has earned his own impeachment. Let's be clear, our entire constitutional system is predicated on the idea that Congress creates laws and the executive branch enforces those laws. Allowing this abuse of our constitutional system to go unchecked could spell the beginning of the end for our republic. I'm proud to serve as a co-sponsor of these impeachment articles. The rule of law must be restored at the border immediately, and with that, I yield back my time to the gentleman from Tennessee.
Gentlelady.
Okay. Dr. Foxx, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses. Mr. O'Brien, one of DHS's core values is to, quote, relentlessly identify and deter threats that pose a danger to the safety of the American people, end quote. However, since January 2021, the Biden administration has released nearly 3.5 million people into the United States and is threatening to release thousands more for purely political reasons. In your opinion, is it possible thoroughly to vet people who may pose a threat to the United States when more than 1 million people are being released into the country on an annual basis?
No, it's not possible at all. I actually ran the vetting program at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. None of the agencies have the capacity to vet people in those numbers, but even more importantly, vetting is something that happens because people have a background that can be traced. In the United States, from the time we're born until the time we die, we're laying down a paper trail of transactions. We apply for driver's licenses, we make bank transactions. All of those things can be used to substantiate somebody's identity. When you're talking about people coming from rural villages in Guatemala or places like Yemen, there aren't any records like that. And in a lot of cases, even when records exist in places like Iran, the governments in those countries don't give us access to them. So I would estimate that something along the lines of 90 to 95% of the people that have come in this wave of migrants are totally unvettable. We have no reasonable way of determining who they are or what their intentions are.
Thank you. Another question, Mr. O'Brien. The Biden administration established policies for immigration and customs enforcement attorneys not to prosecute so-called, quote, non-priority, end quote, cases of illegal aliens in what is known as the Doyle Memo. That memo stated that the preferred way to handle non-priority cases is either non-filing of the notice to appear, or if the NTA has already been filed with the immigration court, dismissal of proceedings. In FY 2023, ICE attorneys affirmatively sought and obtained, quote, 84,000 dismissals in the exercise of prosecutorial discretion, end quote. Does this guidance sound like the President and Secretary Mayorkas need new powers to enforce immigration laws at the border, or is the administration refusing to enforce laws that are already on the books?
The administration is refusing to enforce laws that are already on the books. In fact, it's tripping over itself to not enforce them, which is perfectly illustrated by the example that you just brought up. And the whole prosecutorial discretion thing in the civil context of immigration proceedings is a red herring. Prosecutorial discretion exists in criminal proceedings in order to ensure that a prosecutor is not forced to charge someone before it's ready, before the case is ready to be proven, or that there's no political influence. Administrative discretion is entirely different. Administrative discretion is for the convenience of the government in order to be able to do its job. It's not to allow the government to sidestep seeking the administrative remedy.
Great. Well, I think you've alluded to this already in your answer to my colleague's question, but in your opinion, would H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Act, which we passed last year, help alleviate the crisis at the border?
Yes, indeed it would. It has solid measures to reinforce the laws that are already on the books and to require compliance with the laws that are on the books.
Let me ask a quick question to Ms. Vaughn. Last year, in testimony before the Homeland Security Committee, you stated that President Biden inherited what many claim to be the most secure border in United States history and policies that deterred migrants from crossing illegally. I certainly agree that the southwest border was more secure under the Trump administration than it has been under President Biden. Can you provide some examples of policies that were enforced under President Trump that the Biden administration has rolled back or eliminated?
Well, the first and most important, probably in the context of the border, is the policy to either detain or require that people seeking entry for asylum go back to Mexico to await their proceedings and wait there. If
That's the Remain in Mexico policy.
Correct. And with respect to the interior, the policy under the Trump administration was to allow immigration enforcement officers to enforce the law and not to make exceptions for people because, for various reasons that are under the Mayorkas policies, to let them actually do their job, which, and by the way, they were overwhelmingly focused on removing criminal aliens that came to their attention because they had been arrested for a state and local crime.
The Trump administration was
Yes.
doing that.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much for having this hearing. It is clear from our witnesses that H.R. 2 would be a very effective way of shutting down the border, and that the Biden administration is undoing the policies of the Trump administration and opening the border for people. It's a terrible situation, and it's why we impeach Secretary Mayorkas. I yield back.
Thank you. Quick word here from Ms.
Yeah, I
Garcia.
just want to seek unanimous consent. I seek unanimous consent to enter to the record an Axios article titled "Funding Deadlock Threatens to Make the Border Crisis Worse," which highlights how House Republicans' efforts to solve border funding further exacerbate issues on the southern border. And then also,
I would object to that coming in.
it's an article, it's an Axios.
Hey, if you're going to submit the article, submit it. Don't give me a filibuster on it.
I-
I can read it.
It took 10
So I object.
It took 10
I object.
seconds.
I object.
Well, I'd like to seek unanimous consent to enter the record the Axios article titled "Funding Deadlock Threatens to Make the Border Crisis Worse."
I'm okay with that.
I seek unanimous consent to enter the American Immigration Council report titled 11 Years of Government Data Reveal That Immigrants Do Show Up for Court into the record, which found that a 2021 article, overwhelmingly 83% of immigrants show up to their immigration court hearings.
Okay. There's somebody else you want to have wave on here? No?
No, just assume to the record right now.
Okay, we're going to, so I say it just right. The committee stands in recess subject to the call of the chair. We will consult with the minority to provide adequate notice to members when we reconvene. Are they voting now? They're voting. Why don't we, should we shoot for 210? 215? We'll consult with the minority to provide adequate notice to members of when we will reconvene. The committee stands in recess. Okay, first of all, the committee should come to order. Secondly, I'd like to submit for the record 2 articles by the Center for Immigration Studies, one by Jessica Vaughn and one by John Fear. So ordered. Now, I guess the next person.
Good. Chair now recognizes the chairwoman of the House Education Committee, Ms. Foxx from North Carolina. Dr. Foxx.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank my colleagues for what you have been doing here today, unraveling these issues. Mr. Galinas, in your written testimony, you state that your, quote, objective was to build a diversified private equity platform which would be anchored by a globally known Wall Street brand together with a globally known political name, Biden, end quote. Is it correct that Harvest Fund Management, a $300 billion Chinese financial services company closely connected to the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, was interested in partnering with you and your business partners?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Why was the CCP-connected Harvest Fund Management interested in doing business with you and your partners, Hunter Biden and Devon Archer?
The only plausible reason, and the reason we even discussed, was because of the access that it provided. There was a quote that was attributed to Henry Zhao, the chairman, that talked about the access that it provided. So there's documentation that was contemporaneous that said what their interest was, and that interest was political access.
Thank you. Is it correct that Harvest Fund Management believed that Joe Biden would take a seat on that company's board after his vice presidency ended?
Yes, that's correct. And there were emails to that effect around that time that were circulated by people who were there as part of those conversations, including the golf outing.
Thank you. Are you aware of Hunter Biden ever speaking to his father, Joe Biden, about the plan to have him join the board of Harvest Fund Management?
Yes, I witnessed that, yes.
It seems clear that Joe Biden was aware of his family's use of his office and influence to do business with America's adversaries, and therefore a choice to pursue personal gain over national security. Mr. Bobulinski, is it true that former Vice President Joe Biden met with Li Jingming, the chairman of CEFC China Energy?
It is based on Rob Walker saying yes to that in a transcribed interview. I personally was not at that meeting.
When did this meeting take place based on what Mr. Walker said?
Yeah, in my understanding, it would have been February 2017. After they had a meeting in Miami, I believe James Gillier got on the corporate jet of CFC and flew with Yi Jianming and Director Zhang to D.C. in preparation for that meeting.
After this meeting with former Vice President Joe Biden and Chairman Yi, were any payments made to the Biden family or associates?
Yes, well, it gets to that point of obfuscation. $3 million was wired to Rob Walker's account on March 1st. Actually, they sent 2 wires. The first wire got kicked back, and then they sent a second wire on March 1st, 2017 to Robinson Walker, LLC. And then, as your committees walked through today, they parsed that out to the Biden family in numerous different payments.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, it is clear that Joe Biden is the common element in all of Hunter Biden's attempts to do business with China. There's a pattern emerging that the Biden family and associates, including Joe Biden himself, deliberately chose personal gain over the safety and best interest of the very Americans Joe Biden was elected to serve, protect, and defend. With that, I'll yield the balance of my time to Mr. Gates.
Hunter Biden's.
Thank you. Under Committee Rule 9, we will now question the witness under the 5-minute rule. I ask members to keep your questions succinct so the witness has time to answer within your 5-minute allotment. And I want to respond briefly to the ranking member's comments about the department responding in a timely fashion. It is really clear that our standards on what is a timely response is very different from the ranking member's standard on what's a timely response. Also, our standards for what composes a complete response is very different from what the ranking member believes is a complete response. We got 19 hours before this committee hearing a tranche of material we had asked for months ago. We got it last night. I'd also like to provide notice to the ranking member that I intend to serve a subpoena to the acting secretary if we do not receive by May 6th the department's return to office plan, which the White House Chief of Staff instructed each agency to prepare and submit by January 26th. You don't even follow your own lax requests by your own Chief of Staff. And this committee requested on March 6th. I now recognize the ranking member. Where are they? Yep. Thank you. Acting Secretary, after months of committee oversight, the Central States Pension Fund returned $127 million in taxpayer money it accepted when the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation paid it to fund dead Teamsters pensions. As Acting Secretary of Labor, you're the chair of the PBGC board. This allowed DOL to be involved in PBGC decision-making. What role did you and DOL play in PBGC's original outrageous decision not to attempt to recover these overpayments?
There was never a point where there was not an attempt to recover the payments. Basically, let me just state 4 points. The first is that there were no monies paid to anybody who shouldn't have received it. The second is that, as you know, I think the money has been returned. The third point is that the PBGC has taken steps to make sure that all of the records that are submitted.
But you're not telling me what role you played.
So what we've played is, this is a little bit technical, so bear with me for a moment. When the money goes to the central states, the central states have a fiduciary duty over that funds. The Department of Labor issued analysis that allowed.
We're not interested in the processes that went on. We want to know, and I'll submit this as a question, and you'll need to answer specifically what you did in terms of getting back taxpayer dollars.
Well, but I can answer that. We submitted.
No, I have other questions I'd like to ask now. In September and again in November, Chairman Good and I wrote to you expressing concerns about the Employee Benefits Security Administration's failure to conduct its investigations in a timely manner. The department's responses did not provide full answers to our questions. Therefore, I'm asking you here and now, can you tell the committee how old EBSA's investigations are?
Well, our investigations, the timeline depends on the complexity of the cases. There's not a statutory timeline based in the reality that some cases are much simpler than others. Some cases involve there's much larger plans.
So I understand that, but you're the supervisor. So what have you done personally to ensure that they're closed in a timely manner? All of our offices have to deal with this kind of thing. Where do you step in to see this is long enough, let's get this settled?
Well, one of the things that you're highlighting, Chairwoman, is the importance of our budget request. One of the challenges we have is that we have far more cases.
Sorry.
And we need
as long as
investigators
people are only coming in 5 days and 2 weeks, that isn't going to fly with me. Bring people back into the office. Then you could come and talk to us about more money. People aren't working. So I want to know, will you commit to providing the aging reports on every outstanding EBSA investigation on a monthly basis. We want to know where you are. We have our oversight responsibility. We need to know where you are with these aging reports.
I mean, Chairwoman, I just want to, as the ranking member said, I want to note that we have responded to oversight letters, and I do take your oversight responsibility very seriously. You've mentioned that you also want to make sure that we are responding to acknowledge when we get requests. My team does do that. It's very common for us to respond within minutes or hours of getting a request.
What you're sending doesn't answer our questions. Let me go on to another question. I understand you're interested in expanding apprenticeships, and I want to remind you that apprenticeships do not exist without employers willing to participate. The department's nearly 800-page proposed regulatory overhaul of the registered apprentice system is chock full of new mandates on employers. Can you name a single burden or existing requirement on apprenticeship sponsors that you remove in the proposed rule?
Well, one of the things that the proposed rule seeks to do, Chairwoman, is align high school programs and CTE better with apprenticeship programs, because we are seeing both a demand for workers and a desire among young people and a need to open up opportunities for more young people. So that's one of the goals.
I want to be a good role model, so I'm going to end my questioning. I will send you a specific question on that and give you a chance to give me a specific response. I now recognize Mr. Sablon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Under Committee Rule 9, we'll now question the witness under the 5-minute rule. I ask members to keep your questions succinct so the witness has time to answer. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Mr. Secretary, you've been proudly volunteering the taxpayers to take on the student loan debt of largely wealthy college graduates. Do you believe that students who spend their time in college calling for the destruction of an ethnic or religious group, or spend their time preventing students of particular ethnic or religious groups from walking around campus freely, or spend their time occupying campus buildings, deserve to have their education paid for by taxpayers?
Couldn't hear you that well, but if you're making reference to the student debt relief plan that we've done, I'm really proud of the work that we're doing to provide a lifeline for students who chose to go to college and are living
But I'm talking about the students who are being anti-Semitic and stopping Jewish students from being able to go to class and threatening them. Do you want to have the taxpayers pay their loans off?
I believe that students who are breaking the law and are disrupting the educational environment should be held to account. I believe it's important that all students have access to their higher education classes and graduation.
Well, then, will you commit to ensuring that no student has harassed other students or prevented other students from going to class or broken laws receives any form of student loan forgiveness?
We are committed to making sure that campuses are safe. I condemn any form of hate or any violence on campus. I've spoken to students and educators who have experienced that, and it's our responsibility.
Well, we'd like you to follow through on those who do break the law and make sure they don't receive student loan forgiveness. Mr. Secretary, the COO at FSA needs to have a deep and vast knowledge of how loan operations work, given FSA is de facto the largest consumer bank in the country. Indeed, the performance-based organization statute contemplates high expectations of the COO. The COO needs to be an operational and lending expert and have a keen understanding of massive lending operations. Will you commit to finding a replacement for Richard Cordray, who has real-world experience leading a massive lending operation, so that we can be assured that the financial interests of the taxpayers are protected?
Thank you for the question. I am committed to making sure we have a chief operating officer that has experience, and I look forward to working with you on a process to select.
Thank you. In a similar vein, since September 19, 2023, I've been asking for the performance bonus for FY22 of COO Cordray and FY23 for senior FSA staff, including COO Cordray. This has been met with delay after delay after delay. This should not be hard, as these bonuses are required to be made public. If I do not receive the information requested by noon on the 14th, you will be facing a subpoena. As I mentioned earlier, FSA is a performance-based organization and has the ability to award bonuses to select employees, including the Chief Operating Officer. Did the errors that KPMG found in FY 2022 and FY 2023 in conducting the department's financial audits result in a reduction or elimination of bonuses paid to senior department and FSA staff?
Thank you for the question.
Simple answer, yes or no.
Thank you for the question, Chairwoman Foxx. We take responding to your request very seriously, and we'll continue to share information with you. I'll make sure that we're communicating with your team on a timeline for providing you the information.
Did the audit have an impact on the bonuses? Yes or no?
Within the communication, I would make sure that the answer to your question is there. I can tell you that we take, the audit information that we receive very seriously.
Okay.
And
what are the practical consequences of the department's failure to obtain a clean audit for each of the last 2 years?
Well, we recognize how important it is to work with our auditors, and we've gotten disclaimers of opinions in the past, and we're continuing to work with our auditors to make sure that the information they provide us is used as we continue to improve practices every year.
Okay. On March 6th, I transmitted a letter to you voicing my concerns about the department's 16% occupancy rate. It's been 2 months since I wrote to you about, and 3.5 months since the White House Chief of Staff requested you and other federal department leaders submit a return to office action plan. Will you commit to me today you'll provide the information and documents that I requested no later than May 17?
I absolutely commit to providing you that information as quickly as possible. I hope before May 17th. And I know that we've increased those numbers significantly, so I'm proud of the progress we're making.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I now recognize Mr. Courtney for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And
Representative Scott. Let's go to North Carolina, where the chair of Education and Workforce Committee is Dr. Virginia Foxx, is recognized for 5 minutes. Dr. Foxx.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. I'm going to ask Ms. Silvestri to pull her mic a little closer to her mouth so I was having trouble hearing you before. President Silvestri, you said in your opening statement, quote, our policy is to initiate an investigation each time the school system receives a complaint or we witness particular anti-Semitic, hate-filled, or racist language or actions. On average, how long does each anti-Semitism investigation take?
I don't have an exact number of weeks that it takes, but I believe that we do a very thorough job, so we take as long as is needed to investigate.
Okay. Are the victims always notified of the results?
The victims are notified that an action has been taken, but not specifics of what the consequence was doled out.
Will you pledge to notify people when you have done the investigation?
We are working on improving our communication so that the victims have more information about what the outcome has been.
Okay, working on it. Okay. Ms. Superintendent Ford Murthel, you said in your submitted testimony that you were, quote, excited, end quote, about California's new ethnic studies law. However, we've heard from Jewish families who are concerned that Berkeley's curriculum presents a slanted perspective of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. For example, the curriculum teaches that the war's consequences for Palestine are, quote, no water, no food, no electricity, end quote. Whereas the consequences for Israel are, quote, ceremonies put on hold, travel advisories in place, and cities shut down. Do you think that's a fair representation of the Israeli-Palestine conflict?
I do not think that's a fair representation.
Have you consulted with Jewish groups in considering how you will teach ethnic studies?
So, Councilwoman, Congresswoman, I want to distinguish the lessons that I believe you're speaking about in our ethnic studies curriculum. The lessons that you're speaking about was a lesson set that was created in response to a lot of curiosity, a lot of questions, and quite frankly, a lot of confusion from many of our students wanting to know what was going on. And so we had a group of history teachers and social studies teachers and ethnic studies teachers create a lesson set in response to that. That is distinguished from Berkeley's ethnic studies curriculum.
Thank you. Mr. Banks, we've talked about the map that was posted in a school, the Arab Cultural Arts program at the school, where the map has been funded by the Qatar Foundation, a nonprofit owned by the country's ruling family. The Free Press has found that QFI donated over $1 million to the New York Department of Education from 2019 to 2022 for materials such as this map. You understand the map? You know the map I'm talking about, where Israel does not exist.
Yes.
Okay. Does your office vet the materials purchased by these funds for anti-Semitism? If not, will you commit to establishing vigorous vetting to ensure that foreign entities unfriendly to Israel are not stocking your classrooms with anti-Semitic content?
Yes, and we do vet the materials. That map was not a result of the Qatar Foundation. That individual teacher bought that map on her own with her own resources when she was in Jerusalem. That is what she told us. So it was not part of the resources that came from the Qatar Foundation. But we do vet all the other materials and resources that come into our schools, and that foundation has had no impact. They write the check. They've had no impact on the curriculum that's been developed and how it's been implemented.
So individual teachers are allowed to bring in materials that may be very anti-Semitic. Are you going to vet those materials?
Absolutely. And as we hear about those cases, you know, in New York City, we have 77,000 teachers. And so, you know, this is not Mayberry, it's New York City. It is a very large system, and it's difficult for me as the chancellor to say, you know, any individual map that's up on a wall in any particular classroom, I'm already aware of it. But we make sure that the principals of those schools, they're supposed to provide that level of supervision.
I have one more quick question for you, Mr. Banks. Do other countries donate significant sums to New York City public schools?
I do not have, I would have to get back to you on that. I do not have any evidence in front of me now that we have any other foreign governments which are supporting other programs in our schools. But I don't want to misrepresent here. We can certainly get you the answer for that by the end of the day.
Well, we'd be happy if you would follow up with an answer on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, what grade would you give the Secret Service's performance in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13?
As I've stated, ma'am, this was clearly a failure. I would grade the agents and officers who selflessly threw themselves in front of the president and neutralized the threat an A. I think that we need to examine the events that led up to and prior to that day.
You stated in 2021 that the Secret Service has a zero-fail mission. It's clear that the events of July 13 show a cascade of failures that cost Corey Comparator his life, nearly cost former president his life, and injured David Dutch and James Copenhaver. When an agency fails spectacularly in its mission, those responsible must be held accountable, and the problems must be fixed so they cannot happen again. Why should the American people or the officials you're responsible for protecting have confidence in your ability to lead the Secret Service after such a spectacular failure?
I appreciate the question, and I am committed to finding answers so that we can make the agency stronger after this.
You said on July 15 that the buck stops with me. How are you taking accountability for the Secret Service's failures during the July 13 assassination attempt on President Trump?
I have taken accountability, and I will continue to take accountability. I am responsible for leading the agency, and I am responsible for finding the answers to how this event occurred and making sure that it doesn't happen again.
So I would like to explore how you got the job as director of the United States Secret Service. Is it typical for the director of the Secret Service to be recommended for the role at the behest of a president's family and senior staff, perhaps at the request of Jill Biden or Anthony Bernal?
I got the job as a director of the Secret Service because I spent 27 years in an agency with a mission that I absolutely love. I started my career in Detroit. I worked my way up through investigations and protection.
Was there competition for the position?
You would have to ask those who were involved in the interview process.
But you think you are the best person in the country to head the Secret Service?
I think that I am the best person to lead the Secret Service at this time.
The Secret Service receives billions in funding each year, as has been explained by my colleagues here. In fact, you've had an increase in real terms of 55%. As you're no doubt aware, staffing levels for those assigned to protect the president, former presidents, and other senior officials has decreased by about 350 between 2014 and today. Clearly, a lack of financial resources not to blame for the staffing shortage. In 2022, the Secret Service saw nearly half its workforce leave in 1 year, and during the same year, it was ranked dead last among law enforcement agencies in the best places to work in the federal government. Can you explain why your agency was so poorly rated and why so many staff left in just 1 year?
So with all due respect, I dispute the statistic of half of the employees leaving in 2022. I think that that has been inaccurate data that's been reported out there. But what I can tell you is, as I have returned as the director of the agency, we have had an increase in hiring and staffing and an increase in resources, and we are committed to continue to hire so that we can be staffed appropriately to meet the dynamic mission that we have.
Well, you may want to dispute it, but it's out there. My understanding, given the high-profile failures and rotten culture at the Secret Service during your nearly two-year tenure, why should the American people have any confidence in your ability to lead the Secret Service to perform its zero-fail mission to protect our senior leaders?
The Secret Service has an incredible culture. Our men and women place service over self. They come in every day willing to risk their lives for our protective mission, and they work investigations that thwart people who would do harm to children, child exploiters. We have an incredible mission, and our culture is we will get the job done no matter what.
Well, those on the front line certainly have a great culture, and they were willing to risk their lives for President Trump. But I'm not sure the leadership at the agency has this right kind of culture. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Conley from Virginia.